Listen-only mode.
Good morning. This is Kirk Williams. Thank you so much for joining in this morning or this afternoon, depending upon the time zone that you're in. Welcome to the Effective Executive Status Reporting webinar. I really appreciate you joining in. Just from some of the pre-email and some of the attendees for the attendee rates for this actual webinar, this is definitely a hot topic and definitely seems to be on the topic of many, which is great. First of all, this webinar is the second of the series that we're doing. We did one about a month ago in regards to managing project escalations, and quite interesting that topic translates very nicely into this topic around effective executive status reporting. To make sure that you guys can hear me, can you guys just press the hand button, raise your hand, just make sure that you can hear me clearly, and make sure we don't have any issues before we get started. Great. Looks like we are good there. All right. So before we jump in, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what we're going to be talking about today, the challenge. So as everyone knows, through their respective careers and experiences in managing projects, initiatives, strategies, that complex initiatives are tough. They're challenging. There are a lot of moving parts. There are multiple teams that are involved. It can be highly tense, highly stressful. And ultimately what senior leaders want is simple and clear status, and they want to know exactly when, where, and how, what action they need to take to keep the initiative moving and on track. But the challenge that we're going to talk about today is that executive status often tends to be convoluted and not easily understandable for the senior leaders. So today what we're going to talk about is really 4 strategies to help all of us be more effective with executive status reporting. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. The call is being recorded, and at the conclusion of this call, I will provide the recording as well as a copy of the slides for your reference in the future. Also, during the call, we will have 2 poll questions to kind of get your feedback, so be ready to answer that. Also, my intent with this session is to make it very interactive. So please enter your questions into the chat box on the side of the screen or the questions box, or we're actually tweeting live on social media as well. Hashtag status reporting. Once again, hashtag status reporting. So any one of those three mediums, you can import your questions, and what we'll do is take those questions as they come about throughout the webinar. And my assistant, Eva Pierce, will be kind of watching those 3 items and let me know when questions do pop up. So please let me know your questions and your thoughts kind of as we kind of go through this. Just a quick note about myself. I have been in the management consulting realm for about 18 years. I started up KW3 Consulting about 5 years ago, and prior to that, I was with Eccentric Consulting. I have a lot of experience in managing kind of multi-million-dollar, most likely business and transformation initiatives around technology. I worked with small, large, big companies like Wells Fargo, Cisco, JP Morgan Chase, Callaway Golf, as well as a couple of startups. So for today's discussion, we're really going to talk about 4 key areas. First thing we're going to talk about is the types of status reporting. Secondly, we're going to talk about executive status reporting strategies. So that's the 4 items that I talked about at the very beginning, 4 strategies that help all of us be more effective in the executive status reporting realm. And then we'll also talk through a brief case study, talk about some of the experiences that we've had and kind of how we handle it, and maybe something that you can relate to in your own personal situation. And then we'll wrap it up with key takeaways and next steps. So the first, before we get started, let's do poll number 1, and we want to get a better idea of the challenges that you're experiencing today with executive status reporting. So what you'll see here, coming up on the screen here shortly, is a list of poll questions letting me know where the challenges you are today. So hopefully we can touch on some of those throughout today's presentation. So please go ahead and click on the ones that you feel most applicable, and you can choose more than one. And I'll give about another 30 seconds for you guys to take a vote. Okay, give another couple of seconds here. All right, so based on the results we have here, it seemed like the leader, and kind of based on everyone attending today, the most pressing item that narrows out a little bit is really around leadership is not fully engaged with the initiative that you're leading. And then the second and third one, which are tied at 48%, is really that executives have a hard time understanding the status, and it's challenging to create a meaningful status. So I think all of this is perfectly relevant, and it's great validation with what we're going to talk about today, really around getting effective status reporting. So great to hear that, and no, that's good. So we'll make sure we cover off on those points today. And as you have questions, please feel free to chime in. So first of all, let's first talk about lay the groundwork for the types of status reporting. And as I'm sure, as we all know, because we're all in the project management profession or do project management at some part of what we do every day, there are multiple levels and multiple layers of status reporting. If you look at this pyramid, kind of going from bottom-up standpoint, normally the first in the blue, the first level is really the individual team member contribution. So this is individual members on a project team that need to get status. Ultimately, that gets rolled up into the yellow area, which is the project team status reporting, which really provides overall status and how you're doing for your particular project team. If the project that you're working on has multiple teams, then that gets rolled up into a program level status reporting. And what that includes is status reports summarized across all project teams where there's more than one. Then ultimately, you get to the executive status reporting level, which really is just a high-level visual representation of the overall program/project status and highlighting some key risk areas that need management attention. And sometimes you may see the program level and the executive status reporting the same depending upon the project. But really, the executive status reporting is really at the highest level, very high level, little detail, just enough detail to give the executives the information they need to help manage a project and feel comfortable with where the project is going. You know, oftentimes, as we probably all experience, we kind of look through all the various status reporting. A lot of it tends to be challenging, kind of how you decipher through the various pieces and how do you actually really get to the key points from the executive status report, which is one of the feedbacks that we heard from you during the last poll. So the next question you're probably asking yourselves is, what do executives care about? And let's put it very straightforward. They want true and accurate status. They want to keep it simple. Third is that they want no surprises. Oftentimes we find a lot of complex initiatives and programs that there tend to be escalations, and that's required. But sometimes those escalations come as a surprise, which causes more tense and more anxiety among the team members and the executives. In addition, executives also want to know exactly what decisions they have to make to keep the project going. And ultimately, I mean, we take a step back from it all. Ultimately, what senior executives want is a sense of comfort that the project and program manager, the PM, really has this complex initiative, this program, this project really under control. And really, the nuts and bolts of what we have for executive status reporting is really about managing upwards, making sure that we are giving the right information, with the right level of detail, with the right content, with the right view, such that executives feel very comfortable with where the project's at, whether or not it's in red, yellow, green, but we're giving them all the pertinent details to feel comfortable about the project and where they're at. So the key thing here is really, this is really about managing upwards and managing those expectations, because how many times have we all been on projects or programs where we get requests for status every other day, every hour, in a different way, different splice. And a lot of times that's because we are not necessarily giving the status reporting in a view, in a format, in a look and feel that the executives can absorb and understand very quickly. And that's what we're really going to kind of go through today as well. Any questions at this point? All right, nothing yet. Let's keep moving. I think we have a question. Okay. Okay. Sounds good. All right, here we go. And once again, if you have questions, feel free to enter your questions into the questions box or the chat box, or feel free to tweet with hashtag status reporting on Twitter, and we'll make sure we pick up your questions as well. Great, thank you. So, when we think about executive status reporting, the first thought may be that this is truly just about a document or a report or a dashboard, an actual tool from the status reporting. But when you think about the enormity of what, as a PM, whether project or program manager, what you're accountable for, it's really much bigger than that. The tool, the report, document is just one piece, but it's really about people and process. And then when you put people, process, and tools together, then you really have an effective status reporting process and activity that will really be successful. So today, as we cover the 4 strategies for effective executive status reporting, they will touch on one or more of these areas: people, process, or tools. All right, so the 4 strategies. So for all of us to get more effective at executive level status reporting, there are 4 key strategies. One is you have to know your audience. You have to know who you're dealing with. You have to know the executives. You have to know their communication style, their characteristics, and how best they receive information in order for you to be truly effective. 2, you got to keep leadership engaged. They have to feel a part of the process. They have to feel like that they're getting all the information that they need, and that there's a level of transparency that's required. And from the poll that we just took, keeping leadership engagement really is a hot topic, so we definitely will dive deep on this one. Number 3 is developing an executive dashboard, which is the tool that we kind of referenced earlier. And 4, is about managing project escalations. So these are the 4 key strategies that we'll talk about for the next several minutes. And really, these 4 strategies are key to really getting more effective at executive level status reporting. So how about this? Let's move forward and we'll dive deeper into each one of these. So the first one is, number 1, is really know your audience. And this really deals, in the upper left-hand corner, with the people aspect of it. Often here at KW3, we use what's called the DISC profile, or the DISC assessment, to really understand the personality and character traits of ourselves, but we also use it to understand the character and personality traits of our clients. And what this particular methodology is that basically you go through a questionnaire, 100 questions, and then it goes through an analysis with all your questions and responses, and basically it tells you how you're wired based upon dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. And you can be a high or low in any one of these categories. But I think this is important because before you can effectively communicate to the executive sponsors, to the senior leadership on your engagements, you have to know how you communicate and how you're wired, because how you respond to your executives may need to be modified so you're most effective in communicating with them. So what you see here on the next slide is just an example of some of the results, of a general result of someone that took the DISC assessment. And you can see here that, you see the pink and the yellow highlights, the color highlighting. They're high D, high influencing, and then in the green, they're low on the steadiness, and then kind of right in the middle from a compliance. I think the key thing that you want to take from this is that what we've seen in working with several clients, and many of the clients we've worked with, is that the senior leadership, the C-suite, they really fall in this high dominance category. And what does that mean? That means they're demanding, they're driving, they're ambitious. They really want the end result. It's all about bottom line, did you deliver it? Are we on track? And as a result, what they expect is crisp communication, straightforward, simple, and if it gets complex and if there's potential a change to a budget, timeline, and people, they want a thoughtful process to have options and alternatives so they can thoroughly weigh the options and what they need to do and decide on so they can really, really keep the ball moving. And once again, just to emphasize that without this, without really taking the time to know your audience and know who you're dealing with and who you're managing upwards to and their style, you're going to be in a reactionary mode for a lot of the time because the senior leadership, the senior executives, the C-suite are going to feel like they are not getting the actual information that they need to feel comfortable about the initiative. So once again, it's critical to really know your audience and understand the senior leadership style. So once again, here at KW3, we use the DISC profile, DISC assessment. There are many other tools out there. I know one is Myers-Briggs, other ones like that. But whichever tool you use, it's really important that you really take time to do it, to know your audience, and so you really know how and how effectively communicate to others. And I think there may be a question at this point.
What do you recommend if you report to multiple bosses with different DISC profiles?
That is a great question because I've been in that situation personally. So the question was, what do you recommend if you report to multiple executives that have different DISC profiles? I think that's going to dovetail nicely into our next section, number 2, keeping leadership engaged. In a nutshell, and we'll explain more when we get here, but in a nutshell, what you have to do is really understand what's important for each one of those executives. So recognizing that they have all different leadership styles, that's great, because how you articulate status needs to be consistent, but you need to find out what's important to them and find some commonality. So when we go through the next section, talking about the keeping leadership engaged and some of the strategies that we have for that, I think that's going to be helpful for you and trying to get to how do you manage that. So let me pause it there. Let me keep going. And Sanjay, if I don't answer your question when we get to the next session, please raise your hand again and we'll make sure that we address it. Great. The second area, the second strategy is really about keeping leadership engaged. You know, as I mentioned before, leadership wants to be kept in the loop, and I know we've all experienced where we feel like we're being over-statused and we're creating status 25 times a day, different ways. But in order to kind of minimize this, we got to figure out the most effective way to keep leadership engaged. We need to understand how leadership wants status, what they care about, what's important for them, what's in it for them for this initiative, because all that plays into how we communicate with them, how we communicate status, such that they're getting the right data, information, so they can take that and even manage upwards. And ultimately, senior leadership needs to feel comfortable. As PMs, project managers, or program managers, our role, our job, is to make senior leadership feel comfortable that we have this particular initiative, program, project under control. There's some key strategies in regards to keeping leadership engaged. The two that we use here most frequently at KW3, the first one is stakeholder commitment analysis, and the second one is a steering committee structure. So what we're going to do, let's take each one of these and kind of go into a deeper dive about each one of those. So the first one is the stakeholder commitment curve. So the key thing here is that keeping true to keeping the leadership engaged, the first thing you need to do is understand what is the commitment of that stakeholder. Where are they at from a mental standpoint, an engagement standpoint? Where are they? And then if you look at the end result and you see this, what we have here is a stakeholder commitment curve. The top blue line that goes up here, this shows control, commitment, and ownership. And the one on the bottom shows opposition and failure. And then for each one of these, there are different layers of commitment. So on the top blue curve, which is obviously where we want everyone to be when we're managing a project, we want all senior leadership to really to be on this solid blue curve. The various levels of commitment is awareness, understanding, acceptance, and then commitment and ownership. From an opposition and failure, lack of awareness, confusion, dissent, passive resistance, and then opposition and failure. What we do and what we recommend is that on every engagement, definitely at the beginning and ideally toward the end and in the middle, what you want to do is interview all of your key stakeholders. So Sanjay, to your question before, how do you manage when you have multiple stakeholders with different personality traits? Well, you have to figure out what's important to them. So typically what we do is we create 4 or 5 questions. How do they feel about the project? How are they vested in the project? What's important to them? What are their biggest concerns? It's 4, 5 simple questions that you get a chance for each senior executive to really give their input on where they're at. If you, out of that conversation, what you're going to find is, well, is that executive A on the commitment ownership curve up here in the blue, or are they toward the opposition and failure? And what that does is shows you clearly where each executive is. So what we normally do is meet with each executive, and so the orange bubbles represents each executive, A, B, C, so you have here 7 to 8 executives. And you see in this example, most of the executives are on the upper curve for commitment and ownership. Ultimately, what we want with this commitment curve is that we want all executives to be right up here where the A is. And if they're not, if they're down here where B and C is, or E, F, and G, or unfortunately if they're down here in the D, what that means is that we have work to do. As a project and program manager, we have to make sure that we put the right action items in place to making sure that we're moving all of our executives that are our executive sponsors, our leadership, and moving them up the curve, hopefully toward the A category. So typically what we do is we have a series of questions I mentioned, and we go through and talk to each individual person, and then what we do is consolidate all of that data. And then basically what we create is a stakeholder matrix. And what you see here is you have the stakeholder name across the left. Then you have the details of the conversation in the middle column, which is called background. And then for each one of them, if they're not in that upper right hand curve for commitment and ownership, there should be an action item. So for each one of the stakeholders that's not there, it should be an action item. And we use this on a daily, weekly basis to making sure that the things that we do from a project and program management, that we are actually doing these action items to help us make us more successful. Then what you can do is measure your success throughout the way, and kind of evaluating how you're doing with each stakeholder. And once again, we kind of do these analysis and meet with each stakeholder, try toward the beginning of the project, officially toward the middle, and probably one toward the end. But depending upon engagement, you may want to do more frequent check-in points, especially Sanjay, to your point. If you have different stakeholders, they have different personality traits or different characteristics, you may want to set up one-on-one sessions or quick 15-minute meetings with each one of the executives to talk about status and just check in and just kind of see what they're thinking and see if they're on the same page. And I think that will go a long way from an engagement standpoint and keeping the leaderships engaged. And once again, all in all, having this viewpoint, know where your leadership sits, what their mental capacity is, are they engaged, not engaged, are they committed, are they in opposition, this helps you in really helping to articulate and create the right effective executive status reporting view that you can create and use during your status. So this is really about getting the right level of data so you can customize the need and customize the end product for the executives so it's relative. So let me pause there, and before I kind of go on to the next point around keeping engaged. Any questions? No questions? All right. Sounds good. Also keeping on the leadership engaged portion, the second thing that key strategy that we do under this area is really establish a steering committee structure. For every project that we do, we really establish the structure to making sure that we have the engagement. So what we'll do at the beginning of the project is whoever the executive sponsor may be, we will sit down with them and understand who are all the key stakeholders from a business standpoint, operations standpoint, technology standpoint, if there are any ancillary business line support people that are really committed to have an impact on this one. We ask who are all the people that really need to be involved. And what we do is we establish a weekly meeting, 30 minutes or less, hopefully less, where we really hit on some of the key points from the status, and we'll talk about some of the dashboards here in a second, but really kind of give a red, yellow, blue status on where we're at, talk about some of the key points from a status standpoint, and what are the risk areas, and where do we need their help. So ultimately what this does is it puts in a regular routine on a weekly, bi-weekly basis with all the key folks to review the same status, to get their input, and making sure we're on the same page. And once again, these meetings aren't meant to be kumbaya. These meetings are really meant to get down to brass tacks. So oftentimes these meetings can be, very stressful, high-tense situations, but it's exactly what is needed to keep everyone on the same page and keeping the project moving in the same direction from the executive level. So Sanjay, so to your question earlier, this is another opportunity for you, if you're not doing it already, is thinking about how you can establish a steering committee structure within your group or organization, and getting all the right leaders together on a regular basis with a common status reporting view, and being able to talk through status and making sure we're on the same page. So once again, in summary, on this point number 2, keeping leadership engaged, it's all about getting the right level of data to the leadership, exactly what they want, so they can digest it. 2 key strategies within this one is stakeholder commitment, going through that whole exercise and making sure you understand where each one of your stakeholders is on that commitment curve. And if they're not in the upper right hand quadrant, then there's work to be done, and setting and developing and setting a list of action items was required to move them along the curve. And then 2 is really around establishing a steering committee structure on a regular basis, where you get a chance to meet with the executives on a regular basis, showing a common, consistent status view, and really working through the top items and the risk and challenge areas, such that you can hopefully get some decisions and continue to move the ball forward. Great. Any questions at this point? All right. Moving on to point number 3. This is really developing an executive dashboard. So this really gets to the tool portion of really as far as the effective executive level status reporting. The key thing with creating executive dashboards, I think one of the premise to really making a successful one is really beginning with the end in mind. So with the executive dashboard or the executive status report, what you have to do is making sure that you're talking in leadership terms, their vernacular, their speak. Oftentimes here at KW3, we manage IT initiatives, mobile development projects, workflows, and that type of thing. So oftentimes, what the development team does from a widget standpoint doesn't necessarily translate into what the CFO or the CEO understand. What they understand is business functionality, business process. So the key to communicating effectively and understanding and developing the right level of detail for the dashboard is to speak in the leadership vernacular. So you have to begin with the end in mind, putting status in terms that executives understand, and letting them, through this dashboard, easily identify issues and risk areas. And this is normally what we do at the beginning of a project, when we are in the process of putting together a work plan, a project plan. We sit down with the executives and understand really what's important to them, how do they think from a business standpoint or from their standpoint when they're thinking about this initiative. And what that does is that puts in context for us how we need to articulate status. And I'll go through a couple examples here shortly of something we did recently for a regional bank here in Southern California that was doing where we were doing a business intelligence data warehouse implementation, and talk about kind of what we did and trying to put it in terms that they understand and that was easily identifiable. The last point in regards to developing an executive dashboard is really you got to be consistent. So oftentimes, we're over status. They want status here, want status there, want status here, and all different formats. One thing that we do push, and when we work with our clients, is that we're making sure that whatever status view that we create, we got to be consistent. We have to show it over and over and over again. So for every steering committee meeting we have, any type of escalation that may come up, we always report the same status view. Now we may have additional detail under that to support it, but what we want to do is making sure that we're always consistently showing the same view so executives get used to that, and it helps minimize a lot of the scurry and the back and forth and a lot of the fire drills that do happen. I know there was a question earlier in regards to kind of what tools do we use for this. For us, what we do, we tend to use very simple tools like Microsoft Excel and Microsoft PowerPoint, a lot of for our executive status views, but we have in the past have done a lot of kind of fancy stuff using Microsoft Project Server, where we kind of automate the whole status reporting process, but it takes customization and development. So what you have to do is really kind of figure out for your particular situation, for your organization, what's going to work well, how much time you have. But typically what we do, we use Microsoft Project and other tools, but then from a role standpoint, we typically use Microsoft Excel or Microsoft PowerPoint to help communicate with executives. And from our experiences, executives are mostly used to using PowerPoint, so that's normally the format that we put it in. So now, when we take a look at a couple of the dashboards that we used recently at a regional bank here in Southern California, but what you'll find is a common theme across these dashboards. One is they're very high level. We try to be succinct about it and really keeping it very crisp to the point. Three is there's some level of a heat map, red, yellow, green. Executives love red, yellow, green because it gives them a key focal point on where they need to focus. The green area All right, great. Here's the first dashboard. So during our steering committee meeting with the CEO and CFO of this regional bank in Southern California, where we house implementation, we created this high-level dashboard, really in three key sections. First one is the overall status. This is that first row, and this is our heat map. So what was important to the CEO and CFO was understanding where the project was along the software development life cycle. So what we did, and we had multiple environments, development environments, staging environments, etc. So we created a heat map, red, yellow, green, to know where we're at, and if it was white, it was not started, and if it was blue, it was completed. And you see the legend at the bottom. So this was very, very helpful and succinct for the leadership to truly understand where we're at. The middle column, the middle row, is really the 4 or 5 key points to know about where the project is currently, the key status points, upcoming milestones, key achievements, and anything else that they need to know about. And the last row at the bottom is really key issues and risk. And really, and for each one of those things, we would rate them as high, medium, low. So the executives would know if it's a high or medium, it warrants a conversation during the steering committee, their input, and really confirming that the mitigating action that's required to get this item to a low or off the list, here's what needs to happen. So this was, for us, this was very effective in working with the C-suite at this regional bank in California and making sure that they were definitely on track with where the project was going, and making sure, once again, that they had the comfort level that we had this handled, and that for us, that we were managing upwards effectively. Dashboard 2, this is also another dashboard that we use at the same client for the same project. Once, as I mentioned, this at the highest level, this was a data warehouse implementation. They were consolidating multiple data sources into one data warehouse, one central database. So they're probably like 12 to 13 different data sources. So for the CFO and the CEO, it was pertinent that they understood exactly where we were with each one of the data sources and what the status of them was and where they were along the trajectory of the life cycle from a requirement standpoint, because each one of the data sources had different business owners. So ultimately what you'll see when you start with a dashboard like this, it's all white because nothing's been started. And ultimately the goal is, as you kind of move from left to right, is that this dashboard will go from green, hopefully blue, complete, then ultimately at the end of the project, this whole dashboard will turn to blue, meaning complete. If there are issues, what you're going to find is that some of those boxes will turn to yellow, as you'll see here, and some will turn to red. And then when you present this in front of the executive status team, the senior leadership team, they're going to zero in on the yellow and ask us, what do you need? What's the issue? What are we doing? How are we resolving it? So for this type of format, this did wonders for us and was very, very beneficial and very receptive by the C-suite at this particular client, and helping them stay on track and understanding where we're at in the project and where we really need their help. And once again, what we did when we communicated status, whether it was during our steering committee meetings or maybe it was an ad hoc request from the CEO on a regular basis, we always led with these two slides to making sure that they always had the same consistent status view so they can truly see where we were at. Great. So from a number 3 standpoint, the dashboard, once again, it's all about beginning with the end in mind, making sure you know what leadership wants, making sure you know what resonates with them, putting in terms in simplicity that the executives will understand. But we found that these formats, these past 2 formats that we just showed you, they worked very well for us in some of our previous engagements, and hopefully they will bode well for you or something similar that you were working on. And the last point with developing particularly this dashboard, be consistent. Keep it forefront in everything you do, and when you meet executives, showing the same status reporting view, so they get very, very comfortable with it, and hopefully that will minimize a lot of the reactionary and creating statuses 10 or 12 different ways. That sometimes happens on projects. Great. Any questions at this point? All right. Let's keep moving. Number four, the number four strategy for getting effective status reporting is really around managing project escalations. And we actually dive deep on this topic during our last webinar, and really how you manage project escalations. And oftentimes what we find is that escalations are based on emotion rather than fact. And when we look at escalations, we categorize them in 3 different areas. One in the middle, the green one, is something that's typical, right? So every project, every program, every initiative that has some type of complexity to it, most likely will have an escalation, no doubt there. So that's the proper, normal PM process you would go through to help manage that escalation and keep the project on track and raising that to the executives. But oftentimes, we find to the left, the premature escalations, which you see in the box. And this is really escalations that are based on emotion. People on your teams or your counterparts will raise flags that aren't fact-based. It's more emotional based. Maybe it's due to stress. It may be political in nature. It could be someone that's trying to win over the executives and trying to seem like the rising star, the shining star for your engagement. So we've experienced a lot of this around premature escalations that are based on emotion rather than fact, and how you deal with that. On the last part, you look to the right, late escalations. These are escalations normally when we have team members that were managing a project and we think the projects are on track, and then all of a sudden we find out that either one team member or group of team members, they're behind on a deliverable, and that deliverable has a high dependency on the timeline, and thus there's an impact to budget, timeline, and resources. So this is the unexpected, someone on your team got caught behind, you're caught by surprise. But really the key, so putting that together, the key to managing executive status is having your arms around these types of escalations and really determining what's real and what's not. And leveraging the tools like the dashboard, as well as we talked about previously with the other strategy around keeping leadership engaged, putting all of those in place and having a consistent status view will help you really, really manage the escalation process, the escalation activity that's going to come up during your engagement. And every project has it. It's just typical. In an ideal world, there wouldn't be escalations. There would just be your report status, everything's on track. But how often do we find projects or programs that are perfect or are running perfectly? So really putting your arms around and making sure you have this handled around premature, accurate, and late escalations is really key to the executive status reporting, because oftentimes what we've seen on one of our previous engagements, we had a client individual that oftentimes initiated premature escalations, not based on fact, but just because, based on emotion, just because maybe she was uncomfortable with the process, the new change. And what we did, we found ourselves often in front of the CEO and CFO at 7 o'clock in the morning for meetings, or getting a call at midnight from the CEO about what's going on. So really putting your arms around this whole escalation process, leading with facts, having your consistent status view, knowing the leadership, having that one-on-one, that open communication dialogue is all going to help you in really trying to managing these escalations, these types of escalations. Some key tips for managing product escalations, and once again, we have a full webinar on this one that I'm happy to send out to anyone that may be interested. A couple of key takeaways for managing key escalations. Oftentimes, when you have escalations, if they're warranted, if they're fact-based, there's going to be an impact of budget, timeline, or resources. So oftentimes, like I mentioned before, executives, being that D trait from the DISC profile, they want decisions, they want fact-based, they want thoughtful, they want options. So a key part to managing executive status is also being able to create these trade-off scenarios when required, when you have a fact-based escalation, and being able to articulate, here's the issue, here's some options, and each option is an impact of budget, time, and resources, and if there are, you articulate that, and then you make a recommendation based off to 2 or 3 trade-off scenarios that you put in front of the executive team, and you let them decide how you want to do that. Another point around managing escalations is consensus building. This goes back to our previous strategy around keeping leadership engaged. By keeping leadership engaged, having the stakeholder commitment process under place, having the steering committees, having that consistent view, you're going to continue to build that consensus building and really having everyone move up that pendulum to the far right quadrant. And what that's going to help you do is better manage escalations, because you have more control of the project, you have better containment over everything that's happening. And everything we talked about before, status view, leading with facts, and understanding others. All right. And that kind of wraps up the product escalations piece. Any questions at this point? All right, well, let's keep moving. I did want to move in to a case study where a recent example of another client that we worked with. This client is one of the nation's leading banking institutions. They are a premier provider in mortgage lending, and this particular client had very ambitious goals. Was really to streamline its operations across 4 lines of businesses, the consumer lines of businesses, and really affecting business process, people to some degree, as well as technology, and really streamlining everything. So really going through a business technology transformation process, which is pretty big, right, across 4 lines of businesses. And before we got engaged, the client had been at this engagement for about 2 years. I recognize with this engagement, there was dependency, there was a business angle and a technology angle. And the business and technology groups within this company were never on the same page. So as far as trying to really move this transformational program forward, it was tough because you didn't have business and you didn't have technology groups on the same page. One's talking apples, one's talking oranges. Within the first 2 years, they had spent about $150 million on this engagement and not much to show for it. There were 300 plus people on the engagement. A lot of them were full-time, some were part-time, some from the lines of businesses, some were full-time in the project. And the challenge was that they didn't have much results to show. Nothing was rolled out. There was nothing production. The senior leadership, and there were 4 executives, so Sandra, to your point, there were 4 executives, one from each line of business that were kind of overseeing this overall engagement. They really had no visibility into true status and where the true problems areas were. There was no consolidated view of a project plan, of a program plan across all the product teams. And once again, there were 25 plus project teams on this initiative, and there was no semblance of one consolidated view to truly know where they're at. So once again, there was no facts that they could use for their bosses to truly understand, is this project possible? Is this project on track? What do we do? So we were brought in midterm, kind of when they were already kind of 2 years in, and tensions were high, and they wanted results really to do this. So we came in and we established a PMO SWAT team, and really what our charter was within the first 30 days, create some semblance of an overall program plan across business and technology, which was a huge feat just given that both these organizations weren't talking apples to apples. And the success criteria for this one was it wasn't at the beginning, at the end of 30 days, it wasn't getting to 100% accuracy. It was getting us 80% there with some semblance of a plan, and then we can refine it as we go. So what we did is we led a triage effort and working with each one of the 25 teams from the business requirements team, technology development team, the architecture team, the human performance, change management training team, all the teams. We met with all the teams to understand where they're at. We created a questionnaire to understand exactly where they're at from a product standpoint, from their team standpoint, what were their deliverables, what were the dependencies, what were the key issues, etc. And by getting that information, we understood exactly where each team was. And then what we did, we kind of created a war room with a big whiteboard and really putting all the stickies and all the notes for individual teams and start to put together some semblance of an overall roadmap or program plan for this overall project for both business and technology. Because the challenge is, business and technology, they work aligned together, is how do you know what you have from a business standpoint, what the business needs, how do you translate that and making sure that what's being developed on the technology side is coming together. So there lies the root of the issue. So for the first 30 days, it was understanding and really getting a quick and dirty program plan and high-level scorecard in place to start to help get this project on track. So what you'll see here is what we created over time. First thing we created was this high-level timeline. So there were multiple releases over a period of months for the whole year, that there was no overall plan for it. So we helped them create a high-level timeline based on what we understood from the business teams, requirements teams, understanding what was developed by the technology teams, and really kind of melding those together and really getting them to a high-level timeline across business, technology, training, org design, everybody. So everyone was marching to the same dates and knew the milestones that we were going after. In addition, like I mentioned before, there were 25 teams. 25 teams, each have their own project plans and everything else. So what we had to do over time, what we did initially was, just put all of the tasks across all of the individual teams into Microsoft Project and did a roll-up of all the plans and everything else as well. And then what we did is we created a cross-team exception report, because there's no way that the senior leadership, these 4 key executives from the lines of business that's overseeing the project, can look through 25 project plans and everything else. So what we did is we created a cross-team exception report such that from all the work plans, from all the 25 teams, we would only pull out those milestones that were either in yellow or red. So what you had was this cross-team exception report where they can go by release, which is called sit, drop 1 and 2, as we see here, and you can see by team, here are all the milestones that are at risk of being delayed. Now, some of them have dependencies, some don't, but at least started the conversation in a fact-based way to understand if there's an impact to schedule, timeline, or budget. And then if you want to do double-click, you can get to the individual project team milestone report, and each team have their own report, had all their tasks, all their milestones, if they're on track or they weren't. And so we have this cascading approach to creating this executive level status report, and depending upon what the executives wanted, we have the highest level, the timeline, we have the cross-team exception report, where they can really kind of zero in on just those tasks, those milestones are at risk, and then if they wanted the detail, then they can go down to the individual project team milestone report. So we found this to be very helpful, and it was very helpful in really kind of getting the client back on track and having some semblance of a fact-based discussion. So when we have these steering committee meetings, we led with the facts. We led with the consistent status view that was required, so everyone's on the same page from when stuff is due, timing, and then what's red, yellow, green, or what's not started, or what's completed. So we found this to be very, very helpful in kind of helping move the overall project team to a fact-based way of providing executive-level status for the initiative and getting everyone really, really feel more comfortable. Great. Any questions? All right. As we go through, I want to do, before we kind of get to the takeaways and kind of get to the wrap-up, I did want to do another poll. And what you'll see here, the question is, based on what we've talked about, what strategy do you think is most helpful for you in your situation? So let me pull up the poll here. And I'd love to get your feedback and kind of see what's been helpful to you or based upon stuff that we talked about. So you can go ahead and vote, and I'll give about another 20 seconds or so, 30 seconds, 40 seconds to give you time to provide a response. Okay, give it another 20 seconds or so. Great. So what I see here, the top two strategies that everyone on the call seems to feel most helpful for them is really keeping the leadership engaged and really the developing the executive dashboard, which is great. I think those are two really critical pillars in helping you really kind of helping all of us getting more effective at executive level status reporting, as well as the other ones as well. Once, like I mentioned, I'll make sure that these slides are sent out to all the attendees during the call, that attended the call. So hopefully it's helpful for you going forward as you look to maybe hopefully implement some of these strategies within your organization. Great. So as we kind of wind up now, we're going to about another 5 minutes or so. Key takeaways. So if I had to think about everything we talked about, there are 5 key takeaways that I hope that you kind of gleaned from this discussion. The first one is begin with the end in mind. Understand what's important for executives and understanding for them from a status standpoint, what do they care about? What are the terms they think about? Understanding with the end in mind and what they want will help you matriculate when you think about project status all along the way from the top to the bottom. 2, on that same point, know the expectations, know your audience, know how they're wired, know what they expect. It takes a little time. It may be a little challenging at the beginning, but the more time and effort that you put in toward understanding your audience and what's important to them, what are they concerned about, what don't they like, it's going to deem totally beneficial. As I always say, to me, executing projects, actually doing the work, is for the most part somewhat straightforward, right? There may be some complexity in technology and trying to figure out some new business processes, but the complexity lies really on the people side and making sure that you have buy-in from the executive level, buy-in from all of your team members, and really making sure that from the people side, engagement side, that everyone's on the same page and it's all going, and everyone's going in the same direction. The third point takeaway is really keeping it simple. Once again, executives have little time, so when you structure your executive status reporting process, whether it be the tool, the process, it's all about keeping it simple. So we talked about the executive dashboard, having a heat map, having high-level points around risk items, red, yellow, green, what's most priority that they need to action, really letting them zero in on the stuff that they care about. Good benefits, and keeping leadership engaged. And then also, key point that around executive status reporting, this is really about people, process, and tools. Tools are just one aspect of having a report or document, but you got to make sure you have the people and process in place as well to making sure that you are that you're very effective in the executive status reporting piece. Great. Just one note before we wrap up. At KW3, we are offering an Off the Gantt training series here in Los Angeles on Friday, December 19th. It's going to be in downtown Los Angeles. And with this one, we're going to take one of the status reporting pieces, which is one piece of the overall program management framework that we have in place, but really talk about how moving from this project management to a program management philosophy. So the business-minded thinking like an executive level, the business mindset, and really maturing the project management skills to a program management skills, all about accountability and collaborative ownership. Effective status reporting, talk about today. Product escalation, the last webinar. Knowing yourself and others, knowing the DISC profile, the Myers-Briggs, knowing how you're wired so you can better communicate with others, and adjusting your communication style so you can most effectively communicate to executives and make sure everyone's on the same page. So once again, we are having this training series on Friday, December 19th. Information will be up very shortly on our website. If you're interested, please go back to our website or feel free to email us at info@kw3consulting.com for more information. And once again, it's going to be on December 19th. So I hope you're interested and can make it. And I think I may have one question.
From Pierre.
And a question from Pierre.
Can we use the claim for this event? And if so, how?
That's a great question. Here at KW3, we're actually in the process of working with PMI to get our training sessions a part of the PDU process. And so we're actually going through that process now. So right now, they're not part of the PDU process, but hopefully by our next session, early next year, we'll be part of the PDU process so you can earn that toward your certification. Great question. Great. All right. As we come to the end, I just want to make sure you know, so we have Off the Gantt coming up on Friday, December 19th. So if you're interested, please email me or reply back to the email or check our website as well if you're interested. Also, we will have 2 more webinars coming up in January and February, January 18th and February 12th. So please be on the lookout for that as well. And wrapping up, feel free to take a look at our blogs and updated case studies at KW Consulting. And then we're also on LinkedIn and Twitter. We post regularly every week, new points of view, our blogs and articles, as well as stuff happening, as well as items happening in the industry on both LinkedIn and Twitter. And at the conclusion of this webinar, you will receive a survey and an email as well. So please fill it out. Let me know what you thought of the webinar, your feedback, and how we can improve next time, as well as maybe there's some other topics that you would like to hear about. So once again, thanks a lot. Thank you for attending this webinar, Effective Executive Level Status Reporting, and I thank you and have a great day.